In this corner, officially dating back to 160 BCE, coming to us from Diagra Cultura, repping the Romans, the palate pleaser, the tummy teaser, we have Cato's Cheesecake, also known as Libum. In the other corner, the underdog, officially dating back to 200 AD, but likely much, much older, coming to us from the learned banqueters, we have the gooey goddess of Greece, the cheese that'll keep making you say, yes, please. Athenaeus' Cheesecake. Hey there, I'm Sola El Whaley, and this is Ancient Recipes with Sola. In each episode, we take a dish you may recognize and attempt to recreate one of the oldest versions of it to ever exist. So it's a little cooking, a little history, and a whole lot of me. What's not to love? For National Cheesecake Day, we're doing an ancient cheesecake bake-off, a showdown between the Greeks and Romans to see whose bakers are the ancient champs of cheesecake. Now, when I think of cheesecake, it's the good old New York style that comes to mind. You know, lots of cream cheese, lots of sugar, nice crumbly graham cracker crust. But the oldest recorded recipe for cheesecake goes all the way back to 160 BCE. It was written down by a Roman statesman named Cato the Elder in his work, De Agri Cultura. Now, he wrote down a lot of cheesecake recipes, but the one that we're making today is called Libum. But cheesecakes have a long history in Greece that go back centuries before Cato wrote down his recipe, but somehow no one wrote down a recipe. Luckily, in 200 AD, the Greek speaker Athenaeus wrote down every kind of cheesecake he could think of, like literally dozens of kinds of cheesecakes. Most of the cheesecakes don't have recipes at all, and the ones that do are really vague, but we chose this one to make. So this cheesecake doesn't have a direct translation, but it roughly means under cheesecake. So for Cato's cheesecake, his recipe is really precise. We're gonna use 2 pounds of fresh cheese, 1 pound of flour, 1 egg, and some bay leaves and olive oil. Athenaeus' cheesecake is a lot more simple. It's just gonna be milk and honey that's gonna be curdled and turned into cheesecake. It's not a very specific recipe. It just says some milk, some honey, so we'll see what it does. Now, neither of these cheesecakes are gonna be anything like the modern cheesecake we know of today. One has no flour, the other one has no sweetener, and neither have cream cheese because that wasn't invented until 1872. So I'm expecting some different tastes, some different textures, and I'm wondering if Athenaeus' cheesecake is gonna be a cheesecake at all. It sounds like dip, but we'll find out. All right, so I'm gonna start by making Athenaeus' cheesecake, which, like I mentioned, the recipe is super vague. He said to put some honey into some milk. Those were his specific instructions. So here I have some milk, and to it, I'm gonna add some honey. So basically what we're doing is we're gonna try to curdle the milk with the honey, which makes sense because honey is slightly acidic, but pretty slight. So if I were to curdle this much milk with lemon juice or vinegar, I would only need like a tablespoon and I'd be good. But here I've got 2 quarts of goat milk and I'm gonna need 2 whole cups of honey to get it to curdle. So first I'm gonna let this come up to a simmer and then we're gonna stir in the honey and let it separate. The recipe is super vague, so we're gonna take a little bit of what we learned from the Pompeii episode where I made bread and cheese. So there's a link below in the description if you wanna check that episode out. This has gotta be for the fancy royals. There's no way anyone's just like pouring 2 cups of honey into something. I don't know, unless honey was cheap back then, but it's not now, for sure. So once this comes to a boil, we're gonna add our honey and just let it separate. Then we're just gonna strain off, just like any other cheese, we're gonna strain off the curds from the whey and let it kind of have a second to hang and firm up, and hopefully we're gonna get like a cheesecake vibe. All right, so my milk is at a boil. Now, oh, yes it is, hello. I'm gonna add my honey. All right, so this is going in. And then we are gonna let this milk separate and then continue on with our other cheesecake. A little more honey action. So much honey. Oh, I see it. I see the curds happening. Wow, look at that. Here we go, perfect. Okay, so the acidity from the honey curdled our milk, so it's ready to go. And we're gonna take this up front and strain it. Whoa, look at that. Man, it's such a nice color from that honey. Okay, so we completed step 1 of Phineas's cheesecake recipe. Put some honey into some milk. We've let it curdle. Okay, next step, squeeze the mixture dry. So I'm going to pass it through a strainer to separate the curds from the whey. We've done this before. Pompeii, we're doing it again. Cheese time. There's a lot of cheese happening in these ancient recipes. Cheese, stews. All right, so the curds on this cheese is actually really fine. So we're gonna double up our cheesecake. I always like to moisten it a little bit because it kind of stays in put. Stays put. Kind of stays put. It stays in place. Stays in put. Stays in place when I go to strain. Maybe we need more layers. Let's do that. Whoa. Okay. Yeah, the water just kind of helps it stick to the walls, and then we are gonna strain. This is so cool. It's just honey and milk. Crazy. I think it's pretty freaking cool. Okay, let's see. Here we go. I'm gonna gently pour. Woo! Whoa! It's a cheese curd party. What's crazy to me is this smells just like an Indian dessert because it's got that cooked milky flavor and then you got the honey. It looks like an Indian dessert too. Okay, squeeze the mixture dry. So we're gonna let this drain a little bit before we try to form it. And in the meantime, I will work on Cato's cheesecake. So now we're gonna make Cato's cheesecake. Unlike Atheneus's, this recipe is very specific. We got quantities, we got technique, we got amounts. So I think we're gonna be able to duplicate this really well. So we're gonna start with some farmer's cheese. And he says to pound that until it's smooth. So here we go. So actually the Romans adopted a lot of Greek cheesecake recipes once they got there. And then it became really popular and spread throughout Europe. But this version of cheesecake by Cato is before cheesecake became like a really pan-European thing. So I've got 2 pounds of farmer's cheese. I'm gonna smush it until it's nice and smooth, and then we're gonna add 1 pound of flour, 1 egg, and then that gets baked with a little bit of bay leaf and olive oil. Pretty simple. There's no sugar in here. So I'm really interested to see how this comes out. I feel like it's gonna be more like a cheese bread almost than a cheesecake. Cheesecake came to America with the colonizers, but cream cheese wasn't invented until 1872. So in the beginning, they were making cheesecake with cottage cheese. It wasn't until some guy named Arnold Rubin, he's the one who has the claim of making the first cheesecake back in 1929 when he was trying to make a cheese pie. But I just think it's funny that he didn't make the Reuben.
He did invent the Reuben.
He did invent the Reuben? Wow, this guy is busy. He invented the Reuben and cheesecake? Wild. Cheesecake is kind of like a pie though. Like, I feel like we could have a long debate over whether cheesecake is a cake or a pie. All right, so my farmer's cheese is nice and smooth, so I'm gonna add 1 pound of flour, but we cannot add our flour until we give a shout out to Ceres, the goddess of the harvest, to bless this flour. Hashtag blessed. Shall we go in? Blessed? Okay, here we go. Flour is going in. I'm just gonna keep pounding, mashing until everything's evenly mixed. I feel like this is gonna be kind of like a dough. Quite a lot of flour. Farmer's cheese is really like wet, so I see why you would need some flour. He did mention if you wanted a lighter cheesecake, you could add half as much flour. But we're not modifying it. We're going with what he wrote as his OG preference, you know? Just keep smushing it around. So even though the first written recipe of cheesecake didn't come around until 160 BCE, it's believed to have been around for longer than that. Even Plato and Socrates wrote about cheesecake because they were such a big fan. It was in one of Plato's plays, The Poet. It was just like a small mention, but it's interesting that it even survived because he burned all of his poems and plays when he switched over to becoming a philosopher. I feel like I'm gonna add my egg. Let's go in here. This is getting really stiff, so I think I'm gonna switch to kneading it with my hands like a dough. It really does feel like a dough. We're developing some gluten here. I feel like this is gonna be like kind of dense and tough. But you know, who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. A lot of kneading too. All the greatest ancient recipe hits. Okay, so it's said that at the first Olympic Games in 776 BCE that the Olympians were fed cheesecakes before competing for energy. I don't know if that's true, because when I have a cheesecake, I do just want to take a nap. I definitely think I'm gonna need a nap after this. This is incorrectly named. This is cheese bread. There's trouble with the translation. Okay, so I think this is nicely mixed and ready to put in our testum. Okay, so for Cato's cheesecake, we're gonna bake it in a testum. Ooh. Okay, check it out. So this is an ancient Roman terracotta portable oven. They used to cook meat and cakes in here on the go. You're gonna see, we're gonna take this outside and it's gonna be buried in coals with coals on top, and our cheesecake is gonna bake on the inside. So we're putting our cheesecake right in there. I'm gonna grease it up with a little olive oil. Okay, here we go. And now, in his recipe, he says to line the bottom with some bay leaves. I feel like the bay leaves are gonna give it a really nice woodsy aroma, but it's also kind of like nature's parchment. All right, he said about 15. We got about 15 in there. Very specific recipe. Okay, I'm gonna try and plop this into there. Now, he didn't say to do this, but I'm gonna grease up my hands a little bit because it's very sticky. Here we go. All right, cheesecake buddy, we're going in. What I think is really cool is this is just like an original Dutch oven, you know? Boom. Okay. Now this lumpy little boy is gonna bake and we will see what happens. Okay, so now that we've wrapped up with Cato's very precise cheesecake recipe, let us return to the vagueness of Athenaeus. Okay, so put some honey into some milk. Let the mixture dry. I think that's what this is. Or squeeze the mixture dry. I think we got here. I think this is correct. And then toss it in a dish and let it curdle. So I'm going to transfer our mostly drained cheese into this bowl. Now, you didn't see this, but it took 4 men and myself to figure out how many times we're gonna flip this baby. And this is what we decided on. This is the amount of times. Okay, and then toss it in a dish and let it curdle. It's curdled. So we're gonna move on to the next step. If you have a small sieve, put the dish upside down on top of them and then let the whey drain off. So I'm gonna give this another flip. Now, in earlier translations of this recipe, it sounded a little bit like this had a crust, but the updated translation shows us that it doesn't actually have a crust. What they're referring to is the cool pattern left on top by the sieve. So I'm gonna flip it over again. It's gonna continue to drain, and then we're gonna flip it over one last time. So this is gonna end up being the top and hopefully leave like a nice impression from the sieve. Now this whey over here, I am not going to let this whey go to waste. This whey is super, super freaking delicious. Hold on. It's so good. It's so good because it's just milk and honey. I think that it would be fantastic to add some lemon juice and sparkling water to this and make milk and honey lemonade. I just feel like that sounds like something that a hipster bar in Brooklyn would sell. Add a little bourbon. Whoa, that's a good time. I think that I'm gonna actually keep this and let it hang out for a few days and see if it ferments. Make like a whey beer. I don't know, I'm into it. So I don't know what they did back then, but I doubt they wasted that because it's super, super tasty. But we're gonna use this bowl again for this final flip for the let the whey drain off part. Okay, here we go. Flipping over and we're flipping again. Whoa. That worked. And we're gonna let this hang out and hopefully we're gonna lose more of this whey. It's gonna compress into more of like a cheesecake and we're gonna come back to it. And in the meantime, we're gonna go outside and we are cooking once again on real fires. I'm super excited. I'm gonna take the Testament out and we're gonna cover it in coals. Let's go. So I'm gonna put on my ancient, oh gosh, the ancient price tag's still on. Okay, I think this is exactly what the Romans would have used. Does it feel nicely nestled? Are these coals on top hot? They are. They are hot. All right, so we brought our Testum back in. I thought it was gonna take an hour, but it actually only took like 10 minutes. What you didn't see after we turned off the cameras was it started smoking a lot from the inside, and it was really cool because it was actually coming from the bay leaves we put inside. And it turned it into this really cool smoked orange color. This has had a couple hours to cool, so it's easy enough for me to handle, but let me pull it out of here. We got a little ash in there, but you know what? It's ancient, no big deal. All right, I'm gonna pull this out. This is a sturdy cheesecake. Now the edges of it do look like pizza crust. The bay leaves totally burned, so I don't think I'm gonna be eating those. They did their job. It kept the cheesecake from sticking. Thank you to the bay leaf gods for sacrificing yourself like this for a cheesecake. Okay, this guy feels dense. It's like a loaf of bread. It smells just like pizza. It's kind of crazy. Okay, now, final flip on Athenaeus' cheesecake. It's been sitting here and it drained a bit more from the last time you saw it. It's a little bit sturdier, you know? Okay, final flip onto our golden platter. Hopefully we get a nice design from our sieve. It released. Did you hear that? It was really satisfying. It just went. Okay, and okay, all right. We see some lovely dots left from the pattern of our sieve. It's like it feels like a little bit like a cheesecake mousse, so I'm excited to dig in. So now we are ready for the ultimate ancient cheesecake showdown. In this corner, officially dating back to 160 BCE, coming to us from the Agricultura, repping the Romans, the palate pleaser, the tummy teaser, we have Cato's Cheesecake, also known as Libum. In the other corner, the underdog, officially dating back to 200 AD, but likely much, much older, coming to us from the learned banqueters, we have the gooey goddess of Greece, the cheese that'll keep making you say, yes, please. Athenaeus' Cheesecake. Now, before we taste our cheesecakes, we gotta give it up to the god of cheese, Aristeus. If there is a god or goddess of cheese out there, they deserve all of the thanks. Okay, oh, and we have one other surprise. You know, just in case I needed a refresher on what a New York cheesecake tastes like, we've got one to see how it is, how it compares to the ancients. So I'm gonna dig in to Cato's to start. He does have the first recorded written recipe anyways, right? This smells so good. I really, going in there, I didn't have a lot of high hopes because it's just a lot of flour blended into cheese, but it smells incredible. Like the fact that we were able to take it out there and cook it on charcoal, I think made all the difference because it smells really good. The outside almost looks like the rind of like smoked mozzarella. Hey, that looks like cheesecake, right? That's a lot more like cheesecake than I thought it would be. That's kind of insane. The bottom got a little bit more cooked and crisped up and it kind of formed a crust just naturally. I was not expecting that. That's pretty crazy. Okay, should I dig in? Cheesecake one. Let's see how you did, Cato. Wow. It is, the texture feels very much like a New York style cheesecake. This is a little bit crazy. Okay. This is very surprising. Okay. It's got a little bounce in it because we did develop some gluten with the flour, but it's surprisingly creamy. Even though there's no salt or sugar, it's not bland. That smoke added a lot of flavor. But I do just want a bunch of honey on top of this. But it's really surprisingly delicious. So you see the close-up of how creamy that looks? I was not expecting this. I really thought it was gonna be terrible, but yeah, it's really good. It's like a cross between a cheesecake and a cheese bread for sure. This crust is kind of cool. It kind of crisped up a little bit. I wasn't expecting that. It's definitely dense, that's for sure. Okay, man, wild surprise. Now I'm gonna try Atheneus's. This is very soft. Very, very tender. Oops, I think it's a scooper. Okay, really, really soft, super creamy. Okay, I'm going in. This is super delicious. Okay, something interesting happened here. Normally when you make a fresh cheese like this and just curdle milk with acid, it's kind of grainy. The curds are a little bit tough, but I think because we had so much sugar in there, it's not grainy at all. It's just like super, super creamy. It does really feel a lot like a no-bake cheesecake. I think if this had more time to set up and chill, it would totally be sliceable. But it's super delicious. It's just concentrated milk and honey. And it really tastes a lot like an Indian or Middle Eastern dessert, because a lot of them are based around milk and honey. And I kind of honestly, it reminds me a lot of a Bangladeshi dessert called Roshogolla, which is just like a ball of cheese floating in syrup. So I kind of want to pour the whey on top, right? And have it like a Roshogolla. Okay, my folks out there who know what this is, you understand what I'm doing. This is so delicious. It's kind of crazy. I love this cheesecake. I love this whey. I'm definitely gonna make this again. And I guess since we're here, let's see how this guy does next to the OGs. Okay, so now I'm gonna cut into the New York style cheesecake. See how this guy holds up to the OG gangsters, Cato and Atheneus. Here we go. A messy slice, but you know what? It's gonna work. Now, what's kind of crazy is this New York style cheesecake looks a lot like Cato's cheesecake, the way it browned on top, the way it's creamy on the inside. Okay, here we go. This is the cheesecake I know. I mean, it's delicious. Tangy, creamy, light. No, this is a showdown after all. So, who is gonna be the cheesecake champ? Is it gonna be Cato? Is it gonna be Atheneus? Now, even though this came out a lot better than I thought, I think the winner is clear in my mind. It goes to Atheneus, baby. This is going in my repertoire, for sure. Totally. Amazing. Okay. If you like this episode, be sure to like and subscribe, and hit us up in the comments if there are any ancient or vintage recipes you want to see me try out. And I'll see you next time.